Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from May 30th to June 5th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with Illinois cannabis sales for the month of May, as they were updated as of June 3rd, 2022. And while sales did fall from April's total, where we saw 131.7 million, it is good to see that there's still strong demand despite only having 110 dispensaries in May, where they did manage a total of still 129.8 million. And with that, it's worth just noting the news from last week that these stays have been lifted on the extra 185 dispensaries that were awarded in 2021 in Illinois. And so obviously adding those 185, we don't know when that's going to happen, but that will add to the sales and help drive a lot more growth in Illinois. And with that though, just wanted to highlight still strong demand as items sold did surpass over 3 million, with 3,044,806, while in-state resident sales dropped a little bit from 90.9 million in April to 88.8 in May, or 88.8 million in May. However, it's good to see that the out-of-state resident sales are driving some more of the steady demand as people are coming to Illinois because they know they can get legal access, where we saw in April 40.8 million, in May it's up to 40.9 million. So that is certainly driving more of the sales, but nonetheless just happy to report that there's very strong demand, which will be better and more properly supplied once these extra 185 licenses are finally awarded and these dispensary owners can finally open up shop, continue driving more sales, and help this industry thrive in Illinois. Well, if we move on to Florida, Office of Medical Cannabis use for this past week, if we look at the qualified patient counts, it did increase to 726,390, which represents an increase of 1,802 patients week over week. And while it looks like the growth is really slowing down in Florida, as in past weeks we have seen them increase their qualified patient count by 3,000 or 4,000, it's worth noting that we see the most growth in qualified patient counts in the spring and in the fall, not when it's summer and Floridians are trying to beat the heat, or versus when it's winter and it's prime weather in Florida and people don't necessarily want to worry about getting their medicine. They want to enjoy themselves and have a good time. So with that, just wanted to share a bit of context, and so good to see consistent growth, at least for Floridians getting access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. But with that, if we look at the dispensations for May 27th to June 2nd this past week, we can look at all the MSOs that operate in Florida. We can see how many dispensaries they run in the state, and we can see the number of milligrams of THC sold, the milligrams of CBD sold, and the ounces of smokable flower. And so with that, it does look like sales are strong across the board regardless. And so if you're invested in any MSOs in the state, you can see whether week over week they are increasing or decreasing their market share and seeing if they are staying relevant and competitive in this busy state of Florida. And so with that, on to some state news, as Todd Harrison shares that the Department of Administration projects cannabis sales in Rhode Island, the 19th state to officially legalize for adult use cannabis, and the most recent state as well. And so with that, estimates are for 41 million in sales through the first 7 months of legalization, which are set to begin on December 1st. And so while this will be a very small market, much like Montana, one that we're not going to pay attention to as much as some of the bigger ones, it still just adds to the bottom line and helps normalize the ending of prohibition, as many states are doing and many states will continue to do over time. And with that, wanted to share this one from the Times Union out of New York, as it is a step in the right direction, as apparently New York's cannabis officials follow the first recreational industry rules. And so with that, these draft regulations focus on state packaging, labeling, and testing requirements. So pretty boring. I'm not going to go into it, so you can grab the link below if you wanted to look into that, but nonetheless, good to see them working towards actually launching this adult use program as opposed to delaying like we saw in New Jersey and other states. And so with that, also wanted to share this from Todd Harrison, as apparently the New York Senate approves a bill to mandate medical cannabis health insurance coverage, which is a big deal because this helps normalize cannabis as a medicine in a state like New York, which is a big one. And so this comes from Marijuana Moment. But basically what this bill would do would amend state public health statutes to address the most significant barrier to patient access, the out-of-pocket cost of medicine. And while this is not making mainstream headlines, I do think this is a very big deal still, because it is New York, a state with a large population of 21 plus million people and a massive influence over the American culture, effectively normalizing cannabis as a medicine and creating a law to reduce the costs so that people that need a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids can access it. So it's a step in the right direction, and hopefully this will help wake Schumer up to the fact that cannabis never belonged in the CSA in the first first place and ought to be descheduled sooner than later. And I'm not getting my hopes up, but I do hope he can prove us wrong from now until November. But with that, I did want to share this from Brad Racino, who is apparently editor and publisher at New York Canna Insider. And so while this was a story apparently published or that he shared yesterday, New York Senate passes bill to crack down on illicit cannabis possession and sales. And we would love to see that, because that is a big deal, especially since they decriminalize cannabis. Therefore, you will not go to jail for it. However, they don't launch an adult use program. It has allowed the black market to thrive in New York. And so while we'd be hopeful that the New York Senate passes a bill to crack down on illicit cannabis possession, an update, this did not pass last night, so it's dead until 2023 unless a special session is called. And so I did find this morning, but I just wanted to share it to highlight that while we see publications saying this sort of news, it's also possible that people in the know are more in the know than us, and that, what the headlines are saying might not actually be true. And so, of course, I'm just trying to give you the most accurate information as it comes. And so at this time, I do not know if Brad Racino is right or if the New York Upstate is right. I will keep you posted in the future, because we would love to see some sort of legislation actually pass that will crack down on the thriving illicit cannabis market in New York right now. And with that, though, on to Connecticut. Thank you, Todd, for sharing. Cannabis becomes legal next month. Everything you need to know. So just a reminder, in case you forgot, on July 1st, 2022, already a month away, cannabis will be legal in Connecticut. So I'm not going to go through the whole story, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to check out more about Connecticut. But with that, I wanted to provide this update from MJ Biz Daily, as Connecticut scraps municipal limit on cannabis retail stores and small grows. Small victory for the industry in Connecticut, as Connecticut legislators, I should say big victory, removed a rule that limited the number of cannabis micro grows and retail operations in a municipality, opening up the zoning options for towns and cities in the state. The State Department of Consumer Protection eliminated the rule limiting the number of cannabis stores and small cultivation operations to 1 per 25,000 residents, the Norwich Bulletin reported. And so with that, apparently it was a local zoning issue, even in the first iteration of the bill, according to Caitlin Kressel, Communications Director for the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection. And so it's up to towns now to decide how many businesses are appropriate for their town. And I do agree, it's not up to the government, that should be up to the towns. So now going forward, the towns can decide whether they want more than the government deemed allowable in the past. And hopefully they will allow more, because the more businesses you allow to thrive, the more prosperity, most likely for everyone in that community. And so with that, I wanted to share this one from NJ.com, as New Jersey legal weed could soon be sold at a 19th store. And so slowly but surely, we're getting more online. And so this is more of an update from a little snippet I shared from Chris Norman last week, saying that Verano might get another dispensary approved for adult use. And so Neptune Township in Monmouth County has given initial approval to Verano to expand the company's medical dispensary there to adult use weed sales. And so that is in line with what we saw from Chris Norman sharing last week. So thanks, Chris, for sharing that. While Verano confirmed to NJ Advanced Media it just passed the first hurdle of getting the municipal approval, considered the hardest on its road to adult use weed sales. The company is still waiting approval from both the Neptune Township Cannabis Subcommittee and the full Township Council before it can formally move forward with the process. And so with that, though, it's great news, as obviously Verano is very happy about that, but this comes just a week after the state's Regulatory Cannabis Commission gave the green light for medical cannabis dispensaries to also sell adult use rec cannabis within weeks at 5 more stores at Woodbridge, Union, Eatontown, Lodi, and Montclair. And so while New Jersey started with just 12 dispensaries as of April 21st, this was from last week's meeting of May 24th, I believe, so that will be 5 more dispensaries that can open up for adult use, bringing that 12 to 18 that can supply adult use, and then with that, Verano would be number 19. So just happy to provide that update, as New Jersey slowly but surely doing what they need to allow growth in the state. Well, I wanted to share this great clip from Sabatino that he found on Fox News, and he didn't even edit this. So thank you, Sabatino, for sharing, and credit to Tom Brom72 for the link. So again, just more reason as to why safe banking needs to pass sooner than later, but I'm just happy to relay that some of the mainstream media outlets in the US are finally covering the truth that I've been trying to share about sort of the reality of this very complex situation that they try to make so simple with their eye-catching and clickbaity headlines.
Dan Springer live in Seattle with the details. Dan?
Well, really, John, across the country, and it's ironic that Democrats are the ones that are blocking this bill that would make it a lot safer to operate pot shops, and it's leaders who are holding out for full legalization of marijuana. Meantime, as you mentioned, it is getting way more dangerous. There are lots of robberies at cannabis stores. They've skyrocketed. There have been 100 in Washington state alone this year, one of the first states to legalize recreational pot, and the results are often deadly. An employee was killed in this robbery in Tacoma recently, and there have been many violent takeover robberies in other states where marijuana is legal, especially in California. LA, San Francisco, and Oakland have been very hard hit. Cannabis industry leaders are begging for action.
No one should have to go to work fearing for their lives, and this is an industry that employs over 400,000 Americans at present. those individuals should not have to worry if they will be going home to their loved ones at the end of the day.
Well said.
Cannabis is fully illegal in all its forms in just 6 states now. It's fully legal, including recreational pot, in 19 states. That's all in just the last decade. And it's all in cash because federal banking laws prohibit banks from doing business with pot stores. They can't even use credit cards, so there are literally ATM machines in many pot shops. The SAFE Banking Act would change that. It has bipartisan support and has passed the House 6 times, but it's blocked in the Senate by Democrats like Cory Booker.
Yep. Chuck Schumer.
I will lay myself down to do everything I can to stop an easy banking bill that's going to allow all these corporations to make a lot more money off of this, as opposed to focusing on the restorative justice aspect.
And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has joined Cory Booker in that opposition to the SAFE Banking Act. But John, pressure is ramping up as we see more and more of these pot shops getting hit across the country where it is legal. John?
Yeah, and the expansion of violence is very troubling, and it has to be so worrisome to all of those folks who are either running or working at those places. Dan Springer.
So what do you know? Fox News producing some common sense and actually telling the truth. So hopefully some more mainstream media outlets will pick up the story and run with it as we head into the election season, but nonetheless just happy to see some actual true statements and some real detail being shared, surprisingly even from Fox News. And so with that, just wanted to share Cannabis Business Times, as apparently advocacy leaders launch Safe for Equity campaign to educate, support passage of the Safe Banking Act. And so I'm not going to go through this whole thing, and so you can read a little bit more, pause to read if you're interested about it, but just a summary, as hashtag Safe for Equity supports the inclusion of the SAFE Act in the final package currently being negotiated by the Senate to provide relief for small minority-owned cannabis businesses. And so what they're referring to, the final package here, is of course the America Competes Act, where they're in the conference process right now. And so just to give you a rough timeline based on what we've heard, June 21st is when they want to try and get the final version of the bill done. And so I'll keep you updated, and hopefully I can, find some more updates if there's anything new that we get, but that is the last of the information that I've gotten. So just wanted to share this though, as more pressure, like he said in that story, is building for passing SAFE finally. And so I also wanted to share this one from American Bankers. I found this link, and it's a podcast, as cannabis banking reform is almost here. What happens next? And so I find that interesting because it is coming from American Banker saying that cannabis reform is almost here. And while it's banking reform and not legalization, still sort of not used to what we're hearing from mainstream outlets or any news sources. So is it possible American Banker or this person who makes this podcast for the American Banker might know a little bit more than we do? I'm not exactly sure. This is just speculation, but what I did want to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom just to show you some interesting snippets I found. And so this is apparently an interview with Brendan Peterson, I think, who runs this podcast, and then someone named Kevin Hart, not the comedian, but a cannabis business owner as well, and so someone that would obviously benefit from safe passing. And so just wanted to share this, as Peterson is saying, you might be asking yourself, where would safe banking fit into this in order to get it done? Well, we're anticipating it possibly passing in the America Competes Act. The Congressional Plan B for cannabis banking is another spending bill, but this time the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2023. And while we see that, we hate it, where we dislike to see that, because we had our hopes up last year that SAFE might pass in the 2022 version of the NDAA. But of course, Schumer stuck to his guns, working for Big Pharma, not for the American people, and pulled SAFE out of that. And so while we don't want to see that, because we don't want to get our hopes up again in December and be failed, we do have to plan for that and plan accordingly, because we know Schumer is paid to work for Big Pharma and not for the American people. And so there's a lot in this, so I'm not going to try and read the whole thing or pick what I think is important, because might as well pause to read the whole thing if you're interested. But nonetheless, God love Washington, all the work these great folks do, regardless of what side of the aisle you sit at, but they're not going to make this less complex. They're going to make it more complex. There's going to be more rules and regulations. And so just to add, it's worth noting here that the statutory text of the Safe Banking Act says that banks would be covered to work with, quote, end quote, legitimate cannabis-related businesses. That would obviously include state-level regulations, but it may also include federal regulations coming out of FinCEN or other AML-focused regulators. And so with that, this could be in line with what Brady Cobb has been saying, that while there's no clear wording in safe banking that would allow for uplisting, it could allow the changes to FinCEN and AML guidance, which then could allow uplist. So while this doesn't really give us any more guaranteed answer as to whether or not these companies could uplist sooner than later after this version of SAFE does pass, I did just want to share it because at least this guy knows what we're talking about and he's in the know, and any little snippets I can find that might give us a clearer picture, I do just want to add in. And so lastly, just to summarize this, again, at the end of the day, we're talking about an industry that's worth billions and growing rapidly. That is a fact, so you don't want to ignore the facts on the ground as well. The sooner that industry gets access to the kind of basic financial services that other legitimate businesses enjoy, with or without Congress's help, the sooner cannabis businesses stop being a target for crime, and the more those businesses can grow and flourish, and banks can play an integral role in that process starting right now. And this is one of the few times in life you really see an entire industry become to flourish from seed to sale, quite candidly. There's been a lot of talk for the last 10 years about how this industry evolves. There's a lot of different applications, especially on the medical side, from pain killing, from sleep aids, all different types of applications. We're very much in the early innings, so to speak, of this industry. And so I just wanted to use this to build off of what I said in the last video of how many other industries besides Big Pharma are lobbying for cannabis and supporting it, such as the American Bankers Association, such as alcohol companies. And with that, Big Pharma is getting scared because more and more data is showing us that cannabis is a medicine first and foremost, and that's going to eat into their market share, and they won't like that. And so with that, on to MSOs that continue to execute as Green Thumb Industries opens Good Green Grant applications, which are grants that help nonprofits invest in Black and brown communities impacted by the war on drugs. And so with that, they announced as of June 2nd, leading national cannabis consumer packaged goods company, Green Thumb Industries, and owner of Rise Dispensaries opened applications for the third round of its Good Green Grant program. And so first launched in the fall of 2021, Good Green offers affordable mixed bud flower products, while sales from Good Green products fund grants awarded, say that 5 times fast, to nonprofit organizations that give back to communities of color disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. And so since the brand's launch, Good Green has awarded more than $500,000 in grant money to 8 organizations who encompass the brand's 3 core pillars: education, employment, and expungement, as Good Green is on track to give more than $1 million by the end of the year. So great news from Green Thumb Industries, giving back in states where they are invested in, and more importantly, just to highlight that this mix, or at least Good Green, is available in Illinois as of right now, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia as well. And so with that, onto this news from Verano, as apparently Verano celebrates the opening of Zen Leaf Winewood, the company's 100th affiliated dispensary in the nation. So congrats to Verano for reaching the 100 dispensary mark. I think only Curaleaf and Trulieve have done that so far. While this location is conveniently located off of US Route 30 at 257 Lancaster Avenue, which is apparently a thoroughfare though that sees an average daily traffic count of 25,000 vehicles according to the PA Department of Transportation. So obviously doing their research beforehand to try and capitalize on locations that are going to drive enough traffic to continue organic growth over time. While Verano's active operations span 13 states comprised of 100 affiliated dispensaries and 13 cultivation and processing facilities with more than 1 million square feet of cultivation capacity. And so apparently in this location as well, it's the third most populous county in Pennsylvania, and Montgomery County experienced a population increase of 7% from 2010 to 2020. So that will likely continue going in the right direction, but good job Verano continuing to expand to compete with the big boys, while Trulieve celebrates grand opening of medical dispensary in Coatesville, PA, as on June 2nd they announced the grand opening of a new Trulieve branded medical cannabis dispensary under the Permit Harvest of Southeast PA LLC in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. And so good to see them continue to expand, while Trulieve also operates dispensaries located in the following communities around the state. And so you can check that list out. Good to see them continuing to get a large footprint in the states that they think will matter in the long run, while TerraSend is happy to report that the grass is now greener on the East Coast as TerraSend debuts cookies and Gage brands in New Jersey. And so as of June 2nd, again, a lot of news announced on June 2nd from these MSOs. Today announced that it will officially launch cookies and Gage branded cannabis products in the state of New Jersey on Saturday, June 11th. So while the launch has not started yet, June 11th we will finally see these cookies and Gage products will be available exclusively at the Apothecarium locations in Maplewood and Phillipsburg, 2 of the currently approved 12 dispensaries that are allowed to legally sell adult use cannabis to the very undersupplied market in New Jersey. And so with that, if you wanted cookies or Gage branded products, you would have to go to the Apothecarium locations exclusively. So if you wanted to learn more about the brands, you can pause to read. But lastly, just wanted to jump over to this last one, talking about Air Wellness. I wanted to feature this article because it is well written. Air rises on New Jersey news and is still very cheap, as Air remains the cheapest MSO on an enterprise value to sales and enterprise value to adjusted EBITDA basis at current valuations based on growth that they're going to see in the future and most recent quarter. This, coupled with the potential for a strong second half of the year, makes it an attractive opportunity. And so just wanted to share, this was written by Jesse Redmond, former hedge fund manager and dispensary operator focused on cannabis stocks. I'll give him a follow because I do grab some of his content sometimes. But with that, I did just find this as a very good read through, because even myself, I've noticed Air Wellness is incredibly cheap. And while I do plan to send some money over into my TFSA hopefully mid-month, and while I was hoping to get my tax return, there was an issue where I'm not going to be getting that for a while. And so either way, whatever money I do want to spend, Air Wellness has been on my radar because it is just so cheap compared to the all-time highs that we saw in February 2021. I think last time I saw it was trading at $7, and then the highs in 2021 were at like 43 or something like that, Canadian dollars. And so with that, just sharing that I do think Air Wellness is an attractive option. And if I don't average down on my Cresco or my Trulieve positions, I will likely just start a new position in Air Wellness with that money that I do send into my TFSA. So just wanted to share that for context. But if you wanted to grab this link below, again, well written, and he does provide a good argument. You can grab the link down there. So last news, just to share some state stories and developments, as Marijuana Moment shares, North Carolina Senate approves a medical cannabis legalization bill. And so with that, North Carolina, a very red state, now okays legal medical cannabis. As this bill is going to, in my opinion, help a lot of people at the end of their life at a time when they need some compassion. That is definitely true. And so again, good just to see some of these states move in the right direction. Even if we've had to wait so long for it, better to see it than not. Well, this one comes from Tom Angle. Thanks, Tom, for sharing this as big news. U.S. Virgin Islands Governor Albert Bryan Jr. said he will call the legislature into a special session to pass a cannabis legalization bill, and he is including expected revenue from legal cannabis sales in his new budget. So more on this story if you wanted to grab it below, but just highlighting that even the U.S. Virgin Islands is getting their head out of their asses and realizing the benefits of ending prohibition and getting on track with the rest of the states that are normalizing it. So with that, Louisiana lawmakers sent Governor John Bel Edwards a bill providing employment protections for state workers who use medical cannabis. It's another step in the right direction, especially from a red state that we might not have expected to show any love to the cannabis plant. But of course, if you can get employment protections, if you're taking opioids or any other sort of medicine, then you ought to be able to get it for medicinal cannabis, especially if the state has already legalized medicinal cannabis. And so with that, also wanted to share from Todd Harrison, as apparently California awards $35 million in cannabis tax-funded grants to repair harms of the war on drugs. How about you stop awarding free money that you print, which dilutes all of our, outstanding dollars, and maybe just give tax breaks so that you're not creating new money that dilutes everyone else. That is what people would really want, and that's what lawmakers might do if they didn't have so much pressure from their funders and they actually understood how finance or economics works, but they don't. They just want to print money and hand it out. And so while this sounds good, it's more annoying because we just love to see tax breaks given to the companies so that they can actually fight the illicit market. But, from the point of view of a politician who knows very little and just does what they're told, funds to be used to support job placement, mental health and substance use disorder treatment, legal services, and linkages to medical care. Absolutely nothing against fighting the illicit market that is thriving due to these stupid policies put in place by politicians in California. And so, small little victory there as it's money being handed out, but nonetheless, not as bad as the situation in Canada. So I wanted to use that to roll over to this one from Matt Lemairs, who writes for MJ Biz Daily, as this is just a very interesting example of how unique the scenario was in Canada and, who actually benefited from legalization, many years in. And so let's talk about Canopy's government subsidies. Canopy reached into taxpayers' pockets for over $65 million in pandemic subsidies to retain and rehire staff, apparently. And their workforce in 2020, they had 4,434 employees, 3,374 in Canada, while their workforce as of March 2022, 3,151 employees, 2,174 in Canada. And so they effectively fired 1,283 people after getting $65 million in pandemic subsidies in order to keep that staff. And so, fuck. So while this is certainly wrong and should never be allowed, corporations, much like governments, typically don't want to let an emergency go to waste. And so this is a prime case study and look at one of the many side effects that what happens when we end up in a culture of non-accountability, especially when those at the top, whether they do or don't, are politicians, know that they will not be held accountable, and so they start making policy that serves them more than the people, and everyone at the bottom gets shafted. And so with that, there's a lot more to this, and it does feature Tilray, Aurora Cannabis, and other companies as well. So it's not just Canopy, but it's just an example of how the industry was not run as smoothly as it could have been. And while there were a lot of mistakes, the U.S. companies, I imagine, and the U.S. management of the MSOs have learned a lot from the mistakes that the Canadians made first and foremost. And so just wanted to share this if you wanted to look into it, because it is a very interesting read, and it is telling of how we've gotten to a point where it seems like corporations are working a lot more with the governments than we'd be comfortable with in a free market society. But regardless, some interesting perspective and food for thought. And the main reason I did want to share this was just to reiterate and highlight the point that I've made from the beginning, and that while you can invest in these Canadian LPs and while you can likely buy low and sell high in the future right now and you'll benefit from them being on major exchanges, I do believe that if you can wait and you have the patience, that the US MSOs are obviously the more undervalued and fundamentally sound companies, and at some point they will go from low all the way to high, and based on the fundamentals and the growth projections, especially based on the market of the US, 330 million in total versus just 37 million in Canada, you will be rewarded a lot more, I think, if you can get into these US MSOs early, buy, hold, and wait, for the switch to flip versus being in these Canadian LPs. But that's just me, and all I can do is try to share with you what I know so that you can make the best decisions for your own self and plan accordingly for your own situation. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.